Welcome to this week's Knowledge Nibble, where we will be discussing strength and conditioning, and I will be introducing to you our new method of equine strength and conditioning, the Quad-X method. So first of all then, what is equine strength and conditioning? So in its simplest form, this is a practical application of equine sports science to enhance quality of movement. So this is all about improving horses' movement in order to prepare them for physical work. And we do this through progressive exercises that are tailored for each individual horse. And the areas that we work on are neuromotor control. We want to improve neuromotor control. We want to increase strength. We want to increase power. And we want to improve range of movement. So all horses move. Not all, so all horses can benefit from better quality movement. So this is not just about performance. So whether you have a top level dressage horse or whether you have a leisure horse that you hack 3 times a week, they can all benefit from strength and conditioning. However, all horses are not the same. So each horse needs its own individual tailored program to identify its individual weaknesses and work on those specific weaknesses rather than just a generalised programme. So why do we want to do this then? Why do we want to implement equine strength and conditioning? So strength and conditioning, the primary thing that we want to achieve with this is reduction of injury. So unfortunately we can't prevent injury altogether in horses, but there is a huge amount that we can do to reduce the chance of horses getting injured. And this is a big area that is missed really in general training and equine preparation. We need to think more about how we can reduce the chance of horses becoming injured in the first place, because this is where we'd all want to be. We want to be reducing injury. We want to be in that stage. We want to be working with these animals before they ever get injured. Rather than always focusing on rehabilitation. Once an animal is injured, you're fighting more of an uphill battle. Whereas if you can prepare them properly so they don't get injured in the first place, that has to be where we all want to be. This will also improve performance. So for any of you that are coaches or professional riders, we can improve performance through strength and conditioning, because animals will carry out movements and get to quite a high level they don't always necessarily have the foundations, and that's why they get injured, but also it will help to improve their performance if they have better strength, better neuromotor control, etc. And the strength and conditioning method can also be used in rehabilitation. And in fact, strength and conditioning and rehabilitation exercises don't really vary very much. They are very similar. And most of them are in fact the same. However, when you're working with a horse in rehabilitation, you have to alter the program to be more slow, more progressive, and you also need to identify why the horse was injured in the first place, and try to identify those particular weaknesses and work on those so that you can avoid re-injury. And this also is going to improve overall well-being, which again is something, of course, underlying in all of us that we want to do. Any horse that's prepared properly will have a better chance of having less pain, just having a better quality of life, really. If we reduce the chance of injury, we reduce the chance of pain. A lot of injuries are actually bubbling along under the surface for a long time before they're picked up. So if we can reduce that, and we're going to reduce pain in horses. Also, if a horse is physically prepared to be able to do what you ask it to do, without always feeling challenged or without always feeling very challenged, and they feel more confident and physically prepared to move sideways if you ask them to do that, or to carry out any movements that you're asking them to do when you're schooling and riding them, then that's going to reduce anxiety. You're generally just going to have a happier horse, which is what we all want. So this is physical preparation, and it's about preparing horses to move under a rider without being compromised. So as I've said already, horses can do amazing things. They can jump, they can do dressage, they can do endurance, they can do lots and lots of things. And they will do that. They will do that for us. However, they're not always properly prepared. And so they may be compromised, or a lot of the time they are compromised every time you ask a horse to do something. So let me explain that in a little bit more detail. This picture here, if your horse cannot carry out this movement correctly in a functional way, a correct functional way, and have the strength to move into this position and hold it for a short time, whilst being stable, not favouring one limb over another, whilst moving their spine in the correct way. If they can't make this sort of movement statically, then they're not going to be able to move on the bit and move in self-carriage. Well, they are, but they'll be compromised. So every time you ask them to carry their self, they're being compromised physically. They're using something else, some other mechanism of movement, some other muscle that they shouldn't be using, some other area of strength in their body that they're using rather than what they should be using. They're going to use that, they're going to be compromised. Look at this image over here. This horse, if your horse cannot carry out this movement, so stand on 3 limbs, one on an unstable surface, which most horses can't do straight off the bat. Even, some performance horses can't do this very well. If they cannot do this and they cannot recruit their correct motor control patterns to hold their self in a stable position on this unstable surface, then how are they going to move across a sand school without being compromised? Well, they're not. And this image here is showing a horse which would have, is just imitating a walk pattern. So we've still got 3 limbs on the ground. What when we make that 2 limbs on the ground in trot, or 1 in canter, and we add a rider? If this horse cannot stand on 3 limbs and maintain stability, then every time that horse is moving across a sand surface or across a muddy surface or across an undulating surface, anything other than a dead flat surface, this horse is compromised. So let's break this down a little bit then into strength and conditioning, the two parts of this. So strength and power. First of all, I'd like to point out that strength and power are not the same thing. Okay, strength and power are 2 different things. They're related, but they're not the same thing. So just because you're strong does not mean you're powerful. So strength gains are, so if we want to increase strength, those strength gains are a result of neuromuscular adaptation. So this is really the foundation and the first point of anything, and the first point of any strength and conditioning preparation is to recruit and to improve neuromuscular control and to make these adaptations within the body so that we have this foundation to build on. So strength gains are a result of, firstly, neuromuscular adaptations, and also they can be a result of increased muscle mass. So this is increased cross-sectional area of a muscle. When muscles get bigger and stronger, they are going to get bigger, you're going to get increased muscle mass. And actually, in reality, it's a combination of both. So in order to gain strength, we need neuromuscular adaptations and we need increased muscle mass. We don't always need increased muscle mass. We won't see for 4 to 6 weeks, but we will see change or apparent changes in strength when we start working with horses, if we start improving their neuromotor control. And you can see that quite quickly, immediately almost, and that is to do with recruitment of muscle fibers and neuromuscular control. It's not to do with actual increased muscle mass. That comes after. Okay, but a combination of both is where we get strength gains. Now, power is then built on this foundation of strength. Okay, so power is explosive strength. This is what a horse uses to jump a fence. This is what a horse uses to buck. This is what a horse will use to do piaffe and passage. It's also what a horse will use to jump sideways because a pheasant has jumped out of the hedge. Okay, it's also what a horse might use to go from grazing with his head down to suddenly cantering because something's jumped out behind them and frightened them. So horses will use power, and if it's not trained, then they're vulnerable. If we don't train for that power, then they're vulnerable. And like I say, that's not always the performance horse. That's any horse. So they've got this explosive power. They're very powerful animals. They've got this explosive strength. And I guess we could all say run for a bus. We can all run for a bus. If we see the bus, we can suddenly have explosive power. We go from walking along quite slowly to suddenly running as fast as we can to get on this bus. And we all have that. But if we want to do that repetitively and we want to do that well, we need to train for it. Okay, so power is really force times velocity. So how fast can I move this weight from A to B? That's power. And for a horse, the weight would be its own body weight, but then also we're going to add a saddle and we're going to add a rider. So we need to build in training for this. And just looking at the fact that we need to have a tailored approach for horses. And this was a little quote that I thought was quite nice. Understanding how to apply the correct training modality, the correct volume and intensity, and correct timing of each intervention is the holy grail of strength and power development. So it's not just about doing all these things, it's about doing them in the right order at the right time for that particular individual. So conditioning then. Conditioning is physical preparation, and a definition for conditioning, of which there are multiple, but the simple definition for conditioning is to bring, fill in the blank, bring something into a desired state for use. So for example, bring muscle into a desired state for use. It might be strong enough to graze and move about the field, but we want to prepare that muscle for jumping and moving sideways, etc. To bring bone into a desired state for use, or this can even extend to movement patterns, to metabolic pathways, to mindset. There's lots of ways that we condition our bodies, or an athlete or a horse, to be able to be prepared well to do what we're going to ask them to do. So then we need to integrate that. So we can't have these things all individually. We need to have an integrated program that addresses all of these and prepares the horse best for functional movements. So we need to integrate strength, power, and skill. So we need to have all of those elements. And this is another little quote that I liked as well. It's like an artist having different colours on their paint palette. Mix them well and you have a masterpiece. Dump them all together without thought and you just end up with a mess. None of us want a mess of a horse. So I would like to introduce to you our new method of equine strength and conditioning, which is the Quad-X method. And here is just our matrix, just to show how the basis of how this method works. And it's a method that you can train with us to do. If you're a coach or a professional rider, we'd like to see a lot more coaches and professional riders using strength and conditioning to develop horses the right way. And if you're a therapist, this is now included in our advanced diploma in equine rehabilitation. So our method, if we just look at the matrix, just so that I can explain the basics for you and how this works, it's okay knowing all these things about what exercises to do and what exercises will do this and what exercises will do that. But what we need to know is how to bring them together. When is it appropriate? How do we start? Where do we build? For different horses, when we look at their different movement irregularities or particular weaknesses, how do we build them in the right way? Okay, and for that we have our Quad-X matrix. So this is these are non-linear pillars that we use. And so we're always going to start off with the evaluate quadrant. So everything starts with evaluation. So through a set of specific test and measure approach, we are going to assess the horses. We are going to find out where they have particular strength, where they have particular weaknesses, and we're going to find these irregularities in their movement patterns. From there, we're going to move on to engage, and this is where we stabilize. So this is where, if we don't have stability when a horse is static, we are not going to have stability when the horse moves. So initially, we're going to stabilize the horse. We're going to rebalance the muscles. So we're going to recruit the muscles that are quiet and not doing their job properly. We're going to calm down and quieten down the muscles that are doing all the work that shouldn't be, and we're going to rebalance the horse at that stage. Then we're going to move on to mobilize. So we're going to then move this into movement. So we're going to activate that. This is where we can also bring in range of movement activations as well. We're going to develop the control. So it's all very well being able to stabilize when we're static, but we're going to need to develop dynamic control. And so we're going to bring this all into movement. And from that point, we can then develop. So on top of that, we can build power, skill, and strength. But in reality, this is not linear. So that's one example of how we might move through a certain set of exercises. But actually, this is not linear. We will always be constantly revisiting, the evaluate quadrant, and we are going to move systematically between engage, mobilize, and develop, back and forward with different exercises in this sort of stacked and layered approach, so we can build the horse up to be the best that it can be. So we are just launching this now. So this is the first notification that we are launching this. So we have just developed our website, and it's just in its early phase 1 website, but we do have all the basic information there if you want to go over and have a look. It's quadxmethod.com. If you would like to train with us, we are going to offer, or we have a QuadX Strength and Conditioning certificate, which is opening later in the year. So if you're a coach or professional rider or therapist that wants to become a QuadX Strength and Conditioning coach, this is a registered trademark. So this QuadX Strength and Conditioning coach will only be available to people that have trained through this program. If you would like to be notified when we open that course, then please add your name to the wait list, and you will also be offered the early bird discount when we open that. So incidentally, this course is £1,497, but there will be an early bird for those of you that get on the wait list. If anybody wants to go ahead now, the only way that you can currently get access to the QuadX method is to be on the Advanced Diploma in Equine Rehabilitation. Incidentally, I did mention last week in our Knowledge Nibble that we are raising the price of this course at the end of August. So if you want to do the Equine Rehabilitation Advanced Diploma, now is a good time to get on it. You also get the QuadX Strength and Conditioning program as part of the course. It's integrated into the course, and this is the best price you're ever going to get it. So if you're thinking of doing that and you want to do it, then now is the time. So you can apply through our website for the Advanced Diploma. So if you're thinking of doing that, now is the time. So back to the Knowledge Nibble. Thank you for listening to our this week's Knowledge Nibble, and I hope you found that interesting. So what I'd like you to do now for your actions this week is review your rehab protocols. Are you using strength and conditioning as part of your rehab? Or even are you using it as a separate thing to rehab in prehabilitation, if you like? And reflect on any changes that you can make to your practice to implement more strength conditioning. If you're not signed up to Knowledge Nibbles and you'd like to be, then you can do that at animalrehabhealth.academy/knowledge. And any of you that would like to speak to me about any of what I've or any of this information that I've given you today, you can just email me at katie@animalrehabhouse.academy or katie@quadxmethod.com.